Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had time to digest and reflect on this morning's proceedings. Our next panel will be discussing the applications of AI in delivering operational and clinical efficiency. And this panel is in partnership with PA Consulting. Healthcare systems are responsible for delivering care to thousands of individuals, each with its clinical pathway. As the volume and complexity of healthcare grows, patient pathways become increasingly personalised. Now is the time to embrace innovative technology, unlocking the true value of data to optimize clinical decisions and maximize care outcomes for patients. This debate will focus on the role of AI in the operational management of health systems, how it can be used to unlock the barriers to delivering the clinical medicine of tomorrow, and how we navigate the risks and challenges AI poses. Machine learning, or AI, holds tremendous potential for delivering operational and clinical efficiencies within the NHS. By leveraging the technology, the NHS can optimize processes, enhance patient care, and improve resource allocation. And of course, with every new technology, there are, of course, challenges. So to discuss all of the above, I'm delighted to have some wonderful panelists. Please welcome Jenny Lewis, healthcare analytics expert for PA Consulting, Penny Kehayoglu, Chief Medical Officer and Chief Clinical Information Officer for Coventry University Hospital, Matt Inada Kim, Consultant Acute Physician for Hampshire Hospitals NHS Foundations, and Devesh Sinha, Chief Clinical Information Officer of Barking, Havering and Redbridge NHS Foundation. Lots of people have put questions in on the right-hand side of their screens today, so do keep those questions coming for our guests, and I'll get to them about halfway through our discussions. So welcome to all of you. Jenny, I gather that you've been doing some work to get AI action into hospitals. I'm dying to hear actually what you've been up to. Give us a flavour of what you've been doing. Oh, just put their audio on. I don't think we've got Jenny's audio. Try again, Jenny. We can hear you now.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such an exciting journey for those of us who spend our lives working in and thinking about health data, particularly in the NHS. It's been a fantastic explosion of interest, really, partially driven in many ways by the pandemic. But yeah, so we have stood up a team, which we call our Patient Catalyst team, who are now exclusively focused on AI to and particularly help with operational management with across healthcare systems. And we've started to see some amazing results from that. The data in the NHS is now good enough to do some of these things. To give you some examples, we've been looking at trying to predict the date at which a patient is medically ready to leave the hospital, which is a pretty complicated thing to do. You don't know a lot about these patients when they walk through the door, so you've got to gather information from as much historic information as you can, and then keep feeding the algorithm as you learn more about these patients. And what we found is that our algorithm is able to predict about 22% better than a clinical prediction when these patients are going to be ready to leave the hospital. And it's so critical because that post medically safe period. So after these patients are ready to leave the hospital, they're ready to go home, but we can't get them home because we haven't got some other bits and pieces sorted, care packages or medicines or whatever it is they need. If we can plan as early as possible for when that date needs to be, we reduce the amount of time those patients have to wait around in hospital, releases the bed for other patients. So we're just in the middle of rolling that one out, which is really exciting. We've got another one which is looking at being able to schedule a bed, which is quite a new concept in the NHS. We talked, a huge amount about being able to schedule patients into an outpatient clinic or into a theatre slot. And those are complicated and they do need data, but they're not quite as complicated as being able to schedule a bed. In order to do that, you really have to be able to model and predict the entire hospital. And so we've actually got a series of AI algorithms that are running that build up into a digital twin of the whole hospital and allows us to say with about a month out whether or not there'll be a bed available for a particular elective patient coming in for an operation. And it just gives that extra confidence to the teams booking those patients in for their operations, so that bed will be available for the patient and reduces that risk of cancellation at the last minute. So seeing some really exciting
I was going
things
to say, I
coming
can
out.
see the excitement by the way you're talking about it. So that's brilliant. Let's bring Penny into the conversation. Penny, you dipped on and off there, so I'm presuming that I've got you now. But do you have any case studies where AI could or has improved efficiency where you are?
Yes, absolutely. And I work at University Hospitals Coventry and Warwickshire, and we've got a couple of projects going on, and one of which is the digital dictation with voice recognition, which has made a huge difference to the amount of time we as clinicians spend dictating, because it recognizes what you say and it learns over time. And that's really, really important because we want to minimize administration work that we need to do so that we can spend more time with patients. And one very exciting project that we are actually doing at present is how to improve citizen engagement when the people are waiting for their first appointment after a GP referral. And at the moment, our call center is quite inundated with calls, people trying to find out what's happening to their appointment, but actually having an automated chatbot to enable proactively sending messages to patients and informing them where they are in the pathway, that's quite a revolution in the way we interact with our patients. And that's we've learned through the data we have collected and why people are ringing and what sort of queries people are coming up with. So in the next few months, when we implement this, I think it will make a huge change and positive impact on patient experience and for our call center staff as well.
That sounds really exciting stuff. Devesh, let's bring you into the conversation. What happens from the selling pitch to the NHS floor in AI development?
Thank you, Helen. So yes, I think our journey has been quite chaotic to start with, and exactly the shiny toy selling pitch kind of thing that it will magically fix everything. But what we really realize actually in the end that it's not all that shiny. Majority of the processes actually fall on the holy grail of the acute workflow. But it's not all of it, because if the processes are robust and AI does deliver based on the real data, you have fantastic outcome. So I think in terms of the pitches, I think we've got to be careful before we even start the project and the patient start getting affected by AI. However, just give the example of a stroke. I think we started our AI journey. It was the first AI. So what used to happen, that the stroke patient comes in, fire is on, we have to act quite quickly. And we used to waste a lot of time ringing radiologist around, finding report. And if happened to be a clot in the brain that need urgent surgery, we happen to ring another lot of surgeon or interventional radiologist to take the clot out. And that process could take easily 1 to 2 hours. And what happens now, we are probably the first one who actually has embedded AI in the acute workflow. What happens now in our mobile phone, here comes the image, comes with the result, what is likelihood of having a clot, and upon that, we just call the surgeon direct, get the clot out. The average saving across the country is 1 hour. I think we have proven in our cases is 1 hour, 10 minutes. And that's a huge impact, because that's a time, and time is the brain, that amount of the brain you save. But again, go back to the caveat. Not everything is shiny. Not everything what comes and says that it's going to do that, it does it. There's a lot of things happens between the sales pitch and actual AI and seeing in the function. And we learn that with our 4 AI and 1 AI will not proceed. So word of caution, but a lot of excitement.
Yeah, a lot of excitement. Steep learning curve as well. Matt, it's always lovely to have you on our panels. You're a familiar face for us at NHE 365. I was going to start to ask you about barriers, but I'll sort of back off that a bit. Any good outcomes well, I'd still like to ask you about barriers in terms of, accelerating the uptake of AI systems, but also just an opportunity to say what's happening where you are, and have you got some great outcomes that you can share with us, as well as obviously tackling barriers.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing we've got to get over is the benefits against risks in an informed conversational way with both the general public, politicians, media, and clinicians and systems. Because there's a lot of, I think, false expectations and false assumptions about what AI can bring, and the worry that we may be facing an AI winter, for instance, by not having responsible planning about those ethical considerations and potential impacts on patients. So almost before we can really jump forward, I think we need to have that responsible conversation on a national and international level. So it's good to see the UK are involved in this from a governmental perspective, at least apparently or visibly. But what we need to back that up with is a true charter for patients and the general public in AI. And I think once we've done that, we can then divest into professional groups, systems leadership, systems and organization in terms of the ethical code of use of AI across ICSs, ICBs, hospitals, primary care, for instance. And then the public charter in terms of how data will responsibly be utilized to actually further healthcare outcomes for patients and not be utilized for profit.
What do you mean by AI winter, Matt? Just explain that to me.
So I can't remember where I've read the concept, but the idea of it is that although we've got this massive explosion and interest in data and use of data and artificial intelligence systems, at one point or another, the wheels may come off and the train may stop because of a mistrust from the general public and indeed the world at large, leading to a fallow period where there is a block in terms of further progress on artificial intelligence. What we need is slow and steady in terms of leaps within AI if we're going to make tangible, sustainable improvements across systems and make the evaluative and analytic, assessments that demonstrate its true value. With everything, there is a benefit and there is a risk, and it's just being cognizant of that whilst we leap forward. And everyone in this call is wedded to the idea that AI will make the healthcare system better. We've got to consider other alternate viewpoints and how we bring people along, how we augment the system with what we are doing, how we add clinical judgment and responsibility and overall stewardship to this discussion. And we involve patients at every beck and call.
Yeah, I know what you mean about trust as well, because even on my phone now, the knowledge that suddenly your phone seems to have about you, you're having a conversation with somebody and the next thing adverts are popping up that are relevant. I can understand if it moves too quickly that there will be a mistrust or a worry about, everybody's asking, can I use your location? And it's like, oh no, why do you want to know where I am? Not that I'm anywhere secret. So it has got, I think slow and steady is good. Would you agree with that, Jenny? And I'm just wondering, you started off obviously very enthusiastic about some of the work you're doing, but what are the barriers you've come across? And do you share some of Matt's views there that this has to be slow, steady, thought out for it to be long-term successful?
Yes, I very much agree. And I do think that there is massive potential here, and I think we will see growth of it over the coming years. But I totally agree. We've got a challenge to overcome, and particularly around trust and the regulatory environment. I think the way that we're tackling it is to try to be very focused in the places where we're truly using an AI-enabled algorithm of some description. I would say probably in my working life, 90% of my work is not in that area. And what I wouldn't want to happen is that we stop all of that great work. Like what we have been starting to do is see a huge increase in data quality, amount of data that can be shared, where is it shared, the infrastructure that sits around it. All of those are incredibly important enabling foundations for us to be able to ultimately capitalize on the future of AI. And they've got huge benefit in their own right. I think we would be naive to think that all hospitals are making maximum use of their data per se at the moment. There's plenty still to go after. So my hope really is that we can target AI where it's safe and sensible and prove the benefits that way, whilst at the same time making sure we're sorting out the regulatory environment and continuing to grow this journey of overall data improvement and data benefit that healthcare systems could benefit from.
Devesh, I'm just wondering that, how can one NHS trust increase efficiencies by sharing with another trust and repeating perhaps painful business cases? Is there a system already in place so that trusts can share their learnings, on AI and go on that learning curve together?
Thank you, Ellen. I think there's lots and lots of opportunity and scope here. I think what we have seen so far is that some of the areas or some of the trust is doing absolutely fantastic onboarding and taking the stride, but same time taking the pain of going through tedious business acumen and business exercises like funding, approval, ethical committee, and cover that. And just neighbors trust, another trust has gone on, already using, already had a business case, ethical committee, and here we are. So here's a huge opportunity to have some kind of shared platform where actually we all are in together and we can share those even template. I think I will go up to the level of what we call as, it's not copying, is inspiration, isn't it? The word I use. So it's getting inspiration from each other, and that inspiration could be those finance template or those ethical template, which one trust already has taken the pain and go through that. They will be very nice to have platform. It's not the case that platforms are not there. I think a lot of work has happened through a lot of work is happening about those sharing. But what we would like to see in the future, that we have that shared portal where we think that our organizational problem can be addressed by this is a trust. We almost have subject matter expert to how to get around that, so that not every trust need to take those exercises. Because let's face the biggest challenges or the blockers, people lose sometimes when they come across the hurdle after hurdle. So how can we help them? Is exactly creating that kind of portal. That will be a very nice thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Penny, what do you think are the biggest challenges at applying AI at scale within the NHS?
I think there needs to be a major shift in culture, and it has to start with the people who work in the NHS, including the patients, and that needs to be leadership behind it to support data quality. All the digitization efforts that's happening at the moment, we need to leverage those efforts to, make sure we document appropriately in the electronic systems where we can actually derive the output of that data, and invest in our workforce as well. We need analytics workforce to work with clinicians to understand the data and start formulating those questions that, for example, we need to develop clinical decision support tools. We do, but we need to work together with specialists and with clinicians and with patients to understand what the output and what the benefit out of those tools will be derived. And so I think the major barrier is actually investing in people and workforce at the moment, amongst all the other basic services that we need to deliver. But we need to understand that investing in AI will actually make our services more efficient and more effective. And that's not to say that we're going to not need the people. Quite the opposite. We will need the people to validate those tools and ensure they're working properly and they are refined. But is to invest in our workforce. That's my biggest vision, really, to see happening.
Matt, Penny said leadership and workforce, but what from your view, what are the enablers to accelerate the uptake of AI implementation? And I'm presuming that you also would imagine that leadership and workforce very key to this.
Absolutely, completely agree with Penny, and I think the cell is really important here to clinical teams. The quality of data out is directly proportional to the quality of data in. So if you don't bring people along and they are not part of your data improvement and solidity journey, then you will never get anywhere. And patients are part of that. So they have to understand why their data is so critical to their improving their own outcomes. And I'll give you an example. So I work in acute and emergency care in my day job. And about 5 to 10% of patients have not consented to share their electronic data from a general practice level across our system. So out of my region's 2.8 million population, about 2.4 million have consented, so we can see all their records wherever they've been across the whole region in terms of hospitals, pathology, outpatient appointments, operation notes, you name it, social care. And it's phenomenally helpful in that group. But a proportion do not and have not, because in some ways they are ignorant of what the potential is for the system and what it might offer their health outcomes should they become acutely unwell or sick. And when you ask them that question directly, please share your data, we need it to, potentially save your life, there isn't a single person who dissents against that. So it's about that informed consent right at the beginning in terms of what the purpose of their data sharing is going to be for, and trust that their data will not be manipulated or utilized for any other purpose except for their own. We then have the next stage up, which is, so in my field, which is infection and sepsis management, if you look at 5 million cases, you suddenly get a more reasonable assumption as to what might be going wrong with the patient and what treatments might be necessary to improve their outcomes or optimize them. Without 5 million patients worth of data, it becomes more difficult. Your machine learning model is slightly broken if your N is only 20 or 30 cases, as a clinician's year-long experience might be. So the second transition is actually me as a patient and a population member and as a clinician. I can use my data to further the outcomes for a multitude of patients across an entire population or a condition. And then the third level becomes population level, and how we start influencing preventative and chronic disease management in a way that gets to patients before they become ill. So we really understand what disease is, the precursors, the genotype, the phenotype, and the other elements, both environmental and others mitigated against within a patient's lifetime, that then go on to lead to high-risk presentations or unfavorable outcomes. So there are three basic levels for me that we need to engage on, and different conversations and different ways of having those conversations to ensure that we get the ultimate in terms of compliance.
Absolutely. Jenny, why have you chosen to work on operational challenges rather than directly clinical use cases?
Yeah, I mean, partly linking back to this conversation, actually. So there is no doubt that data and AI more broadly can support both sides and should support both sides. And I should also say that clinical involvement is key, no matter what you're doing with healthcare data. So we would take that throughout. We think the operational side is a little bit overlooked at the moment. So there's a lot of effort that's going into how could AI in particular be used to provide some sort of clinical decision support. Lots and lots of investment going into particularly imaging, and that's brilliant. We're not saying that's a bad thing at all, but the way we see the world, the healthcare system is going to become unmanageable very, very quickly with the advances in clinical care, the complexity of pathways. We're not far off a future where everybody will have their own personalised pathway, and we're going to have more and more different options that people can take. It's just not going to be possible for our old systems of clipboards and Excel spreadsheets to manage patients through that complexity. So we think we need to be thinking now about what are the more advanced algorithms and the operational decision support that we need in the healthcare system to help to tackle some of those things and unlock that future and those, the immense progress that we're seeing in our access to clinical care.
Good answer there. Devesh, in terms of clinical adoption of AI, what are the ingredients of non-adoptions? How can we change cynicism that perhaps is out there among some colleagues into the exciting journey that I can see you all believe is there with the right, regulation and protections in place?
Yeah, both Matt and actually Jenny talked about that how critical is there of clinical engagement from very beginning, or even operational engagement if you're doing operational work, for example, site manager, bed manager, and rest of the people. And the reason the non-adoption, what we have faced is exactly that cynicism to start with, and going to really do what it says on the tin, or is it really going to solve the problem? But actually, if you take them with you throughout the journey, and that journey become quite exciting because they start seeing that, and the whole criticism and cynicism start moving towards, well, there is something for me in it, or there is something for my patient in it. And that journey is quite inspirational and quite transformational. And then idea flows in. That actually, we call it very simple, garbage out, And that's not actually a bad thing, because actually when you start seeing that clinician board and say it doesn't work, and you ask the second question, why it doesn't work? How can we make it work? And then we say, only if we do this, I think there's a chances you can get something out of it. And that clinician you already bought in for, I think, forever till you could do that project, or even longer, because then we start seeing the outcome of his or her intervention in that. So I think non-adoption happens because we don't probably give that due attention to the actual workforce which is trying to deliver it. But when this adoption happens, I think the example of it, we started that. The radiologist was the first person who were probably not that impressed. And now they are, because what they're seeing it, nobody disturbed their already busy workflow where they can give attention, which they get used to get around 20 telephone from store team. So, there's something for it for everyone.
Certainly is. I was just sorry, I was looking slightly distracted there because I'm just keeping an eye on. There's a question coming up for Matt in a second. But Penny, as an oncologist, I just wondered, can AI applications be used for speedier and more accurate diagnostics in things like breast screening? I thought about that because Jenny mentioned imaging a moment ago.
There is a huge opportunity for cancer diagnostics, for sure, to improve accuracy and to speed up the diagnosis. And we've got plenty of use cases, as you say, breast screening, lung cancer, melanoma. And we need to learn and educate our colleagues about the benefits of those. I think that's really important. And Deves mentioned about taking people with us. I mean, there's ultimately quite a lot of fear, I think, seeing my colleagues, how they think about AI, what it is and what it isn't. So education is really important, but also understanding what benefits it could bring. Certainly in cancer, not just in diagnostics, but remote monitoring in oncology, that could be a revolution. Trying to understand and predict which people are going to deteriorate, and how can we pick up these people during their treatment so we can avoid admissions. That is huge, not just for patients, but also for organizations and the sustainability of our system, to be able to, when somebody's going to get unwell, and give them the right treatment before they fall off a cliff. That's extremely important.
Well, that's very, very important indeed. The reason I was looking distracted, Matt, a couple of bits and pieces coming in for you. Emily says, hi, Matt, doesn't data have to be shared in the case where it directly informs patient care in terms of opting out from NHS data collection? I opted out of NHS digital data collection and was told my data would be used for patient care / treatment across services, i.e. A&E and GP. In addition to this, what's your opinion on semi-anonymous patient records where the patient's details are directly removed? However, mention of other people within the notes are either kept in my initials or first name.
So the first question is data trust, isn't it? It's about a process called pseudonymization of data from a research perspective, to ensure that no personal details can be shared or accounted for in terms of the records. And that's a process we use from a research perspective across population level studies, or indeed smaller scale studies as well. So pseudonymization itself is a technique. And that should be sacrosanct to all research and evaluative studies, and indeed population studies and analytics across even hospitals or departments. The second element is, if you opt out, you opt out. That is your decision. It's your data. So the fact that systems are saying to patients that actually your data will still be used is a failure of said system, in my view. And this is where that regulation and charter needs to be put in place, because it's absolutely at the beck and call of individuals within society to say yes or no to allowing their data to be utilized for anything, either on a local, a regional or population level. So this brings up huge amounts of questions from the ethics of data usage, and why almost our first step has got to be to form that national charter that everyone signs up to, from an industry perspective, a governmental perspective, and a healthcare perspective, to ensure that individual public people's rights are respected and understood across the whole system.
Just quickly, while I've got you, Matt, and just quickly, because I am running out of time, low-hanging fruit. When we're talking about unlocking potential, is there some low-hanging fruit at this stage?
I think from an efficiency and effectiveness perspective, absolutely. And it's really great to hear the stories about healthcare management from Jenny, in terms of the clipboard analogy and what we can do better with AI and big data, because I think that's absolutely true. From a clinical perspective, for me, sick patients who die are needles in haystacks, often in a field full of haystacks. So how do I identify those patients who need me now, or need me urgently as an acute and emergency clinician, when I've got hundreds of patients to see? So what can AI do to tell me who I need to go and see right now, versus who I can be a bit more leisurely about seeing in terms of a batting order? And then thirdly, if I'm a patient who has a lifetime risk of 1% of X condition or Y condition, what are the triggers that should lead to me seeking help, or what are the triggers that the healthcare system should utilize to come and find me and therefore prevent a serious mishap happening to me? These are the exciting questions, I think, that will radically transform our healthcare system and that we already utilize within healthcare, although at the moment on pen and paper, and not enough with the use of very big data.
Absolutely. Final thought to you, Jenny. I do want to try and end on an optimistic note, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on whether a public health system will be able to afford properly AI, because that's obviously a massive factor in all this too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can afford not to afford it. So we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way through this. I think the biggest trap we need to not fall into is to think that AI and data more broadly is a cost-saving measure. So most of what we've talked about on this call is actually more about making a more effective healthcare system that drives up better quality care for patients and reduces risk and clinical harm. We need to find efficiencies elsewhere in the healthcare system that allows us to then fund the people to be able to do this, the infrastructure to be able to do it, the change that needs to sit around it. And if we can do all of that, then I think we'll be able to really capitalise on the advantages it offers.
Oh, fantastic panel, and the enthusiasm of all of my guests on this panel, much appreciated. We've said several times this morning, exciting times ahead, and I think there really are exciting times ahead, and I agree very much with Matt about that charter being needed. But I don't think there's been such an exciting time in healthcare. So thank you all for putting your thoughts there, and also to PA Consulting for partnering with us on this panel. And thank you to you for being with us so far. It is time for lunch now. So let's meet back for our next session about the role of advice, guidance and triage in recovery after a well-deserved break, and let some of the information from this morning's discussions soak in. I'll see you back here at 2 o'clock.